much.
Oh, okay.
Because he would have gotten charged. So we're good.
Oh, okay.
I'll tell him so.
Well, I heard it was hot.
Yeah. He should be fine. You should see him pop out of this.
Well, I guess it's about time to go, huh? Should you just double check and make sure everything's set up the way you want it? Okay. Yeah, that's okay.
Probably cool. We need one of those for.
All right, well, it is 2 o'clock, so I guess we will go ahead and get started here. Thank you for coming to this next installment in the series on, oh, my slides got advanced here. There we go. So this next installment on the series of online instruction best practices sponsored by our outreach program. And today it's course implementation, and some of the topics that were suggested for this installment were creating a supportive online community and time management strategies. So I'm going to spend the bulk of the time here on that first one, creating a supportive online community, but we'll talk about time management at the end as well. And to organize my thoughts on creating a supportive online community, I am going to once again turn to the community of inquiry framework. I touched on that or talked about that a bit a few weeks ago when I did the presentation on teaching presence. So the community of inquiry framework is a way of understanding what goes on in an online asynchronous classroom, and it talks about teaching presence, social presence, and cognitive presence. And teaching presence and social presence work together to facilitate cognitive presence, and that's the cognitive presence is where the learning really happens. It's that deep engagement with the course material and the critical thinking that we want our students to engage in. So teaching presence and social presence facilitate that. I talked about teaching presence in my last presentation a few weeks back. Today, we'll be focusing on the social presence. So social presence is, in a nutshell, it's the students' perceptions that they're really interacting with real people. Sometimes if you're in an asynchronous online environment and you're just seeing text, you kind of almost get this unreal feeling like you're just maybe you're just interacting with a bunch of bots. But if you have that teaching presence, you really understand that you're interacting with real classmates on the other end of all that text. So I'm just going to run through some of my ideas for how to facilitate social presence in an online classroom. And one of the first things that I think is important is to try to find some opportunities to let students see faces and hear voices instead of just seeing text on the page. And there are a variety of technologies that can help this happen. I'm not going to do a really exhaustive demonstration of all of these on the list here. I'm just going to highlight a couple. Most of these I've used myself. There are a couple I actually reached out to my online professional learning network and said, hey, what tools do you guys use? So there's a couple tools on here that I'm not even all that familiar with. But I've made, for people who didn't get them, I've made my handouts available. You can pick up the little sheet there, or people who are zooming in can email me and I will provide you with the handout so you'll get this list. One tool that I use quite a bit is Flipgrid, and that is, it just makes it very easy. You set up this grid and people can jump in there and record very easily with just a microphone and a webcam, can record up to, if you have the educator version, up to like a 5-minute video, or you can cut it back. You can limit them to 30 seconds or whatever. And I almost always do Flipgrids at least for the beginning of semester introduction now. I haven't, some people use Flipgrid even for discussions. And they do all their discussions with audio and video instead of text. I still think there's some advantages to having people write their discussion posts, but the first, that beginning of the semester, introduce yourself, I always do on Flipgrid now, so that they can see right off the bat at the beginning of the semester, they can see that their classmates are actually embodied students and they have faces and wild gestures and voices, and it's good. It's a good way, and it's very, very easy, and it's a good way to just get community started right off the bat. Another tool that I use quite a bit is VoiceThread, and VoiceThread actually lets you upload a PowerPoint, and then you can narrate each slide, and you can have your students comment on each slide of the VoiceThread. You know, if we had more time, I'd demo all of these, but I think I'll just kind of explain them, and you can explore them later. VoiceThread, unfortunately, it used to be more open, and now their free account, you're limited to 5. You're limited to 5 VoiceThreads, but I believe it's just 5 at a time. So I think you can delete old ones and create new ones with the free account. And then there's educator options too. Another thing that's pretty easy for most students now is just have them record videos of themselves on YouTube. And you know, with YouTube, you can post a video and you can have it as either as private, public, or unlisted. If it's private, only the creator can see it. If it's public, everybody can see it. If it's unlisted, I find that a very nice option. Only people with the link can see it. So in a sense, it allows you to only share with your classmates or only share with people that you want to share with. And they can just post a link in the discussion board of the online site, and you know, you can see, get that voices and faces instead of just text. Movely is a video creator, and that is one that a friend just suggested that yesterday, so I don't know very much about it, but I just put it here for everyone to explore. SoundCloud for creating audio files is another one that was just suggested to me recently. Audacity is another option for creating audio files. It's a little more involved because you have to, the Audacity, it's a free download. It's a nice program. If you want to export as MP3, you actually have to go in and download this add-on. So it takes a little bit of setup, but if you have students who are tech savvy enough that they're willing to do that, you can have them create audio files with Audacity. So those are just some ideas of just techie tools out there. They're not the only tools, but just some suggested places to start if you want to get faces and voices into your online website. So that's one, just the faces and voices, that's one thing I do to try to create community. Another thing is let students get acquainted socially at the beginning of the semester. Those icebreakers that seem just really routine, and everyone does an icebreaker because you have to do an icebreaker, they really are important. You know, if you've done a lot of them, if you've been teaching for a while, they might start to feel trivial, but they aren't. Because it gets that social presence started, and social presence is something that it really is just social at the beginning of a semester. And as the course goes on, ideally you want to see less just social chit chat and more interaction around the content of the course. But that has to start somewhere, and at the beginning of the semester, it starts with, you know, everybody introduce yourself and tell an interesting fact about yourself. Or let's all play the 2 truths and a lie game, and everybody tell some things about themselves and let your classmates try to guess which one is a lie. And you know, those kinds of things to start off the semester are actually super important, whether you do something fancy or just everybody introduce yourself in a Flipgrid. They're very, very important. And then as the semester goes on, let students continue to share personal experiences, but get them more and more connected to the course content. I mean, this is comparatively easy for me because of the courses I take. I have working professionals in an online class, and you know, so I can say, okay, this week we're talking about communication theories. talk about a communication challenge that you've experienced in your workplace and analyze it based on these communication theories, right? So I'm making them apply the theory, but I'm still connecting it to personal experience and getting them to share personal experience. And we know that connecting the new content to our personal experience and what we already know is a way that helps us learn. It helps our cognitive processing. But when you have people share and discuss that, they get to know each other better. So somebody says, well, my biggest communication challenge is that I'm a kindergarten teacher and I'm talking to 25-year-olds at the same time. And, these are the challenges I face and this is how I deal with them. And they apply the theory, but they're also talking about their life as a kindergarten teacher, and their classmates are getting to know them better as people out there in the world doing great things with kindergartners. And so that builds that social presence. And then I try to use kind of low stakes collaborative projects in an online class. Everyone hates group projects, and the reason we hate them is mostly because of scheduling. It's not because we hate working with our we're always a little afraid of the slacker, and that one person's going to get our A that they don't deserve, but we do. But mostly it's time, and it's just hard to get together with people. But at the same time, we know that talking to other people about what we're learning and grappling with ideas together is a way to learn, and it's a way to to build that social presence in the classroom too. So I try to do a few things instead of one huge group project that's worth a lot of their grade, and there's a place for that. But in my online classes, I try to look for opportunities to do kind of low stakes. Maybe the LMS, the Brightspace right now, you can set up groups and you can set up a private discussion space. So maybe I'll have an assignment near the beginning of the semester that's just, get into these groups and everybody pose an interesting question related to the reading. And so they 3 or 4 people work in their private discussion thread and come up with a question, and then when they're ready, they post it to the public board. Or maybe have them just go do something on a shared Google document, or opportunities where you make them work together, but it's not 50% of their grade, and it's not you're going to flunk the class if the slacker drags your group down. It's just, here's a small project, get you talking to each other, create a little bit more social presence, as well as a little more conversation around the content. So those were some ideas that I came up with that I use to try to create a community in the classroom. What ideas do you have? I know I haven't thought of them all. So are there things that you do that you use to create community and relationships and get people talking to each other socially and about the content?
One thing I've learned this semester the hard way was I had people of different groups connected on Zoom and realized that was making it a lot harder to get to know individual names. And so last night, we met synchronously, but we all were on individually. And it made I felt like they were getting to know names a little better.
Yeah, and I agree with that, just from what I've seen with my one experience so far, and then visiting your class. So what's going on with both Dr. Stansberry and I is we have our ed tech program has a NASA educator cohort in Houston, and we started the semester. Our program is not an online program. We have hybrid courses that are part online and part face-to-face, and we wanted to recreate that face-to-face experience. So we started the semester telling the NASA folks, how about you guys gather in the Johnson Space Center and use Zoom, and we'll just have 2 face-to-face classrooms connected by Zoom. But my first, and my class went online for a couple of months after the first meeting. Dr. Stansberry's had more face-to-face meetings, but my first experience with the connecting 2 classrooms on Zoom didn't go great. The classroom wasn't well set up for it. So what she's saying is having people when you're connecting online, having individual logins on Zoom so that you see a person's face with their name, and when they're talking, the camera zooms in on them, and that is a way to use. That's a better way to use the technology to create social presence, to make you get to know real people. That works better than the connect the two classrooms. Like we thought we'd have better social presence if we had the Houston people face to face together, but we're kind of finding maybe that didn't work so well, and that maybe we need to use the technology to help us bring people in.
They kind of made a game out of who's at the most interesting places.
Oh yeah. The cigar bar was an interesting place to. We've had people share a little bit of themselves in that way. I mean, as long as they can find a quiet enough place where they can hear and we can hear them without too much distortion, they can say, hey, this is my living room. Here's my favorite cigar bar where I hang out, and they can share more of their lives as real people. So yeah, so it's taking some experimentation to figure out how to use. As new technologies come along, you don't always know how to best use them, and you kind of experiment and say, oh, that didn't work, let's try this, and use the features of the technology to bring people closer together. Do you have a question? Or?
Yeah, I was wondering if you have a class here, or if you also know one.
Well, that's how we had it set up. So we had one group here, we had a room in Tulsa and a room in Houston. And so that was our initial plan, is those rooms would be connected. But communication, we realized they really weren't getting to know each other in the way that we wanted them to. Like, I knew everybody's name and face, but they didn't know each other's names and faces. And so I just went to them. When did we decide? I think I first started with I was in this class. I first started with that group here and said, what do you think would be better? And I think that's always my best ideas have come from just going to the students and saying, I don't feel like this is working quite how I intended. What do you guys think? And they usually come up with, well, let's try this.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I mean, it's a good point for teaching in general, but when it comes to social presence and getting people to know each other and getting the class to work, I mean, it's okay to say, hey, I thought this was a good idea, but it's not working. What do you guys think?
Only allow those connected with everybody.
Well, the intent was that everybody would connect with steering group. And then I would travel between the sites. So, and Pam Brown did this forever with that Thompson. So what we tried this week, just as a trial, and I don't know what we're going to do. Next week is all online. So I'm not worried about the next 3 weeks, because the next 3 weeks are all online. But as of last night, I polled everybody to see if it would work for everybody's schedule, if they would just connect visually from where they were. And we had guest speakers come in, the 2 guest speakers were on the site. And well, you're the student, what do you think? Did that help you get people's names and faces matched up?
Yeah, I think it's quite better.
Okay.
When you connect them individually on the Zoom. So, if somebody is talking, you see the person on your window. Yeah. And the experience is, to be honest, it's almost the same to me, because you already know them, because we have 2 classes. So assuming we have just a class, that will be better. But since we have 2 classes and we interact,
Yeah. So I know some of the people follow. We don't have too many people zooming into this meeting, but I'm sure you can't hear. But we're kind of just talking about how you, when you have this kind of synchromodal thing where some people are face to face and some people are online, and it seems like it's almost better to offer everyone the option of zooming in from their own location, rather than, you know, saying, well, the Stillwater people have to come to the classroom, but the Houston people Zoom in. The Houston people are going to have the same problem. They're going to see this big classroom full of people and won't need to be able to see faces. Okay, well, we're actually, this is getting closer to the end here, so I'm going to move on to the other kind of topic that was suggested to address, and actually, Tang very diplomatically called it time management, but I'm kind of thinking of it as how do you stay sane when you're teaching an online class, because it can gobble you up. You need to figure out what kind of boundaries work for you. And so I'm just going to share a few ideas. So decide when you will answer emails and then inform your students of that. So, you know, different things work for different people. There are some people that say, I'm only going to answer emails between, you know, 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday because I have a family, I need my weekends, whatever. I personally feel like if I get an email from a student on a Friday afternoon, a Friday evening, and I can answer it without too much trouble, it actually is less stressful for me to just answer it than to say, okay, I got to make sure that Monday morning when I'm willing to answer email again, I don't forget that student. So I think, things are different for different people depending on your other responsibilities and your family and your personal preferences. But I think the important thing is to kind of figure out when you're going to be available to your students and when you're not, and tell them that, and then, stick to it. I do answer emails on weekends because for the working professionals in my online classes, it's actually easier for them if assignments are due late on Sunday. So it wouldn't make sense for me to not read my email on weekends when that's when they're finishing up their assignments. So I do answer emails. I tell them, this is what I tell them, that I try to answer emails within 24 hours, but I'm also an absent-minded professor, so I tell them if they don't hear from me in 48 hours, they should feel free to politely remind me. But I think, and then really try to stick to that, try to make sure that you do get back to people when you say you will. Because a prompt response to a question is important to students, but having boundaries is important to you. So I think the bottom line is figure out what works for you. Make sure it's reasonable, be a little flexible. Like me, I answer emails on weekends because my assignments are due on weekends, and then just inform the students and stick with it. If they know that that's when they should email, they'll adapt. I also use a public forum for questions so that students can help each other. And I probably should have taken a screenshot, but I always have, I showed it in my last presentation, I always have at the top of the discussion board, I always have, and I got the idea from Dr. Stansberry, I have a discussion forum that I call the office water cooler. And inside the water cooler, I have a few different topics, but one of them is questions. And I subscribe to it so that hopefully when everything is working well, Brightspace will send me an email every time someone posts a question. But it's a question that it's kind of like raising your hand in class and asking a question in front of the whole class. The whole class can see the question, the whole class can get the answer, so that you only have to answer the question once. And maybe if it's a question that other people know, maybe the classmates will step in and answer it. So, to whatever extent you can get the questions that people are comfortable asking publicly out in that public space, that kind of cuts down on the repetition and the workload a little bit. For assignments, I use a lot of peer review. So I can have people looking at each other's papers. And usually what I'll do is I'll have a deadline that's just, you have to submit a draft and you get so many points just for turning something in. Then we send things out for peer review, you get feedback from your peers, then you turn it in again, and then I grade for quality. So that peer review, it builds the social presence, it gets students working together, it gets some really obvious, like, wow, this paper is kind of confusing. I think I wasn't sure what you were saying. It gets some of those, big problems fixed before that they turn it into you. So then your grading goes quicker because you're getting, you're getting better quality things that are easier to grade, and the students have learned because they've worked together. So I find peer review to be, it's a good teaching strategy anyway, but it's also a time management thing for me.
How long do you allow the peer reviews time frame? So
It-
you allow them 3 days or a week?
Well, it depends on the assignment. Quite often I try to build in so they have a week, but it depends on the size of the assignment. I try to, as much as possible, have assignments due on weekends because my students are working professionals. They do a lot of their work on the weekends. And they're master's students for the most part, sometimes PhD level. If I were teaching undergraduate classes where it was mostly students who are on campus anyway, I might have shorter deadlines and more things due during the week. So it kind of depends on the assignment. I talked about this last time in teaching, when I talked about teaching presence, but read every post, but don't feel like you have to respond individually to every post in the discussion board. It's not even necessarily a good thing to do. If you're too active in the discussion board, it could actually make the students either post less or address all of their posts to you instead of talking to each other. So don't feel, you want to do some summaries and some communication with your students so that they know that you're reading what they write, but you don't have to feel obligated to respond to every single post. And that's time management strategy. It happens to be a good teaching strategy. So what other ideas? We only have a couple minutes here, but so what other ideas you have for staying sane or questions? Rubrics for grading, right? That's a time management strategy for any teaching environment, whether you're teaching face-to-face or hybrid or online. Having a rubric to go to do the grading, it helps you communicate with the students with less writing the same thing over and over again. It makes the grading go faster and your communication with students is clearer. And you get, if you make the rubrics public before the assignment is due, you actually get better work, and we all know better work is easier to grade too. It's really easy to go through and say check, 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 you get an A. It's a lot harder to say, oh, okay, how much partial credit does this deserve? So, other ideas or questions? Yeah.
You mentioned this, and I talked about it in the very first session, but being, kind of consistent with when things are due. It's not only helpful for the students, but it's helpful to keep your brain sane. If you have stuff to do on Sunday nights, okay, Monday maybe I can start grading.
Yes.
And students appreciate when they have kind of that regular feedback and they know when to expect it. So if it's a larger assignment and it's due on a Sunday night, I know my students typically expect that I'll give them feedback just because of how I am, probably by Wednesday at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of have a pattern that they're following and that you're following.
Yeah, so that weekly rhythm, if you can kind of have assignments, the same type of assignment, do the same day each week, the students get into a weekly rhythm and you get into a weekly rhythm. Everybody can plan their time better. Other ideas or questions? I don't think I have anything more here. There's my reference for if anyone is interested in the community of inquiry. Garrison, Anderson, and Archer 2000. There's a lot of work done on community of inquiry, but that was kind of the article that introduced it.
Okay, I want to say one more thing. I think for some of us who teach this stuff and have been researching our own teaching, this seems normal, but I think a lot of people, there's research opportunities in your teaching with some of these frameworks, or like what I know you're thinking about moving courses to hybrid or online format. There are so many research opportunities in there that I just wanted to encourage other people that there's so much nursing education online that you guys, it's unbelievable how much nursing education online learning crossover areas in research?
Yeah, you know, even though online learning isn't brand new, but there's new tools coming up all the time, and there's a trend now more towards more hybrid rather than either fully online or fully face-to-face. There's a lot we know, and there's still a lot we don't know. So there are definitely opportunities for research, and online courses have one advantage in that you have artifacts. You have a lot of data just captured right in the course website, and you know, ideally you get IRB approval beforehand, but in some cases, if you're going to de-identify, you can get IRB approval to go back to old courses from a couple of years ago and use that data as long as it's fully de-identified. So there's, you know, it's a good data. There's a lot of data probably just sitting there in your online courses if you want to partner with any of us in ed tech to help you figure out how to do a research project and analyze some of that data, we love to collaborate. That's kind of what we do in ed tech, is we kind of help you teach your content, you know, help you figure out how to integrate technology in a helpful way to teach whatever it is that you're teaching. So come and talk to us. We love that. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, just want to thank you all for coming. And there's 10